Thanks for tuning in to the Dynamic Defense Solutions podcast. If you're a new listener, we're glad to have you. Welcome. And if you're one of our older listeners, you're probably wondering what's going on here. There's been a few changes. There has. This is still DDS Unscripted, or I should say it's formerly known as DDS Unscripted. This is our new branding, kind of new, fresh start at the getting back into the podcast. Podcast is now called the Minutemen Initiative. And today we're just going to be talking about the trajectory of the podcast, kind of why we've changed it the way we have, and we also get into introducing ourselves a little bit. Today I just have Steven with me, so sit back and enjoy us just have a conversation about the new direction of the podcast, kind of our mentality behind why we've made the switch, and the things we really want to be focusing on moving forward into the future. All right. Dude, isn't it with the Matthew McConaughey straight out the bat? No way, dude. That was super unintentional, but we're going to roll with it. So if you're tuning back in and you're a former podcast listener of ours, yes, this is still the Dynamic Defense Solutions podcast. I'm here today with Steven.
What's up, guys?
And I'm Jacob. And we're gonna do a little explanation, because if you're a new listener and you've never listened to any of our podcasts yet, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for becoming part of the listening family. But we hope you stick around for some more episodes. But a little bit of explanation for some of our OG listeners. So we're doing a little bit of rebranding, and so don't worry. The podcast is still the same. It's going to have the same DNA, same vibe. Just us just talking way too much. And no, not really, but actually, yeah, it depends. It depends on what topic it is. But we're going to be breaking down stuff. We're going to go into that in a little bit. But yeah, changed the name. Got rid of some old episodes. We still have them, so we'll probably there were some good episodes back in those days. So we may revisit some of them in the form of maybe going back over some of those topics, but kind of in a new way. But we may also relaunch some old ones. So just kind of a fresh start since we've been gone forever.
Yeah.
And how long has it been?
It's been
over a year.
Over a year because, well, yeah, it's got to be over a year by now.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty much ever since Caden kind of stepped away. We did a couple without him, but they were pretty staggered.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's been at least a year. I know that.
Yeah. And we're going to have Caden in here as much as we can. The reality is it's definitely going to be Steven and I, and then we're going to bring guests in. We've got a lot of other people we want to bring into the podcast. So we're going to do a lot of that. And then Caden was originally our third man on this, and he was a big part of the kind of original podcast, and he's still going to jump in anytime he can. But a little bit of background on him, again, for kind of our OG listeners. And you may know, because we've gone over it before, but he is a full-time special mission aviator for the 210th Rescue Squadron. So it's a super busy job, and I guess they're short on what they call backenders. So the guys in the back of the helicopter. And that's the spot he's in. And we live in Alaska, so, rescue operations here is an ongoing thing. People crash planes and get lost and, get caught in the weather, get caught out at sea, whatever the case may be. And he is, he's one of the guys that goes and picks people up, saves lives, or brings people home. So that's super busy job. I just talked to him last night, and he's in Fairbanks right now doing some stuff up there. So yeah, he's going to jump in when he can, but realistically it's he's not going to be available to do all the episodes like he used to be in the past.
Yeah, which is, he's going to be missed, but like you said, we'll try to get him on as much as possible. So we'll definitely have him and some other characters on. But
yeah, characters is the perfect explanation for that. But so just to kind of catch everybody up and also give a little bit of just a little bit of info on kind of where we're headed, and also, you know, if you're a new listener, this is going to be a little bit of an intro to what we do and who we are, and kind of the whole purpose of this podcast. But I guess a little bit of backstory. So the podcast used to be called DDS Unscripted, and the reason for that, so early on, when was this? Like, this was back in 2018, maybe 2017 even,
probably 2018.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to remember when we started. It could have even been, I think it was the tail end of 2018. I'm trying to remember when our first episode launched.
Yeah, I think it was the tail end, because I don't think we met Cade until 2018, like summertime.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so the original intention, and it's kind of where we were as a company back then. We were trying to push into the YouTube space, but we were going about it in a very amateur way. Like, it was our equipment was basically iPhones, and then we bought some iPhone gimbals and some like really cheap like phone jack microphones and stuff like that didn't really give you any benefit. Like, you know, it was just like,
no, we didn't know what we were doing, and we didn't really ask questions either. That was kind of our main problem. Was, if you're going to get into that, ask people that are already doing it, or like most people are pretty open about equipment and stuff like that, as far as like recording and videography, photography, all that stuff. So, well, especially if you're not going to be, if you're doing it for just yourself, you're not doing it to like potentially steal business from other companies. Like, pretty much people will just tell you anything. If you're like, oh yeah, we're just doing it for personal gain, you know?
Yeah, our own like in-house content. But I would say that's half true, because I think we did ask, but we just couldn't afford it. Like, it was like, the answers were very expensive. It was like, you need this kind of camera, and then you need these lenses, and blah, blah, blah. And at the time, we were like, dang, like, we don't even know. You know, at the time, the YouTube content was kind of like I don't want to say an afterthought, because it's always been a big part of our brand and what we're trying to do, but it wasn't a financial priority, is how I'll say that. So, but the original plan for the podcast and the reason we kind of named it DDS Unscripted was because we were going to use the podcast as a platform to do long form, extended conversations on what our videos were about. So our YouTube videos are obviously cut cleaner, edited, a little bit shorter. Oh, a lot shorter, because podcasts are, you know, can be hours long. Yeah. And a YouTube video is about 5 to 10 minutes. So we were going to make these YouTube videos and, you know, do like a review, let's say on like a handheld light or something. Just different things. We're going to do product reviews and, you know, explanations on different stuff. And DDS Unscripted, you know, obviously the YouTube video being scripted to some extent, you know, cut together nicely, pre kind of decided lines, I guess you could say. But then we wanted a long form version of that so we could really get into the weeds on whatever that stuff was, which was why we came up with the name DDS Unscripted. So it was like an unscripted, just time to talk about it. And that was like the original intention of this podcast.
Yeah.
So that we found out pretty quick that it was a lot easier to record podcasts than it was to make YouTube videos, especially with the equipment we had. So we started looking around, and actually one of the guys we do a lot with, Andrew, he now owns a local media company. It's Vantage Point Media, super awesome local company, but he started getting camera equipment because he was at the time pushing into doing more media related stuff. So we started playing around on the range with that, and I think Steven and I saw the capabilities of just like
having a Sony camera with a gimbal, and we're like, dude, you don't really need much besides that. Like,
well, yeah, and we realized
and roll with it.
How much better it was than our iPhone setup that
you
we're trying to
don't know
push
until you put it on a computer and you start like actually messing with it on, Adobe or whatever, and it's like, dang, dude, this is way better. Like it's night and day. So definitely worth the investment if you're planning on getting into anything like that. Like iPhone cameras can do it all right, like if you're on a budget, but
yeah,
if you're gonna really dive in, it's worth the investment. But
yeah, and Steven and I have always been the kind of people that it's like, if we're gonna do something, we want to do it right, and if it takes longer to do it right, then we'll just take longer to do it right. Like that's sometimes to our own detriment, I think, but we definitely when we decide to do something, we try not to cut corners at all. And we're okay. I guess the whole quality over quantity, I guess, mentality a little bit. So yeah, we basically said, well, we're not doing YouTube until we can afford to buy all this stuff. Which now we can. So we do have YouTube videos. As of right now, I think we only have medical stuff up, but we have a lot of other videos in the works. It's just the two of us right now. So it's, we have some other people that help out, but realistically, as far as like day-to-day operations, it's me and Steven. So, it's hard to really, that content takes a lot of time and commitment and, attention. So,
yeah, I mean, there's guys that literally that's all they do is just YouTube content. You got Grant Thumbs, people like that they're not like, obviously they're going out and training and they're doing their normal job, but like we are doing the business and trying to do a podcast and all the everything that goes into business, like, whether it's taxes and all the paperwork and all that crap. It's just like,
oh, it's a disgusting snowball of of crap that you have to deal with, but
yeah,
it's fun. It's worth it, but it's a lot of work. So, but we've got really good high quality videos up, and that's the thing, is we're going for quality. We want everything to look good, convey what we're trying to convey in a good manner. So the long story short, the YouTube and the podcast are separate.
They're not disconnected.
Yep. They're not going to, I mean, they may dovetail a little bit, like if we come out with a video on, maneuver tactics or something, we want to talk more about it on the podcast, that's something that we would do.
Yeah.
But as far as the original idea of like, okay, we've got the scripted YouTube video, and then we'll have the follow-up long-form DDS Unscripted podcast about that video, about what we did in that video, whether it was review a product or whatever, that idea is kind of gone. So,
yeah, which is kind of comical because we finally get YouTube videos and then we switch. Like the original plan was like, okay, let's we got to have YouTube videos in order for this to make sense. But then we stopped the podcast. We were able to make YouTube videos. Yeah. And then we start the podcast back up, but now we're doing a different podcast that's not about the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Now that we actually have YouTube videos, but
that's actually hilarious. I didn't even think about, I didn't make that connection until you just said that, but
yeah.
Yeah, very unintentional, but it's just the way, there's been a lot of changes, like in us as a company. We've learned a lot, and it's kind of cool because there's been a shift in the gun culture that I think is for the best. And you have like a lot of people in kind of on the Instagram community, and you have companies like TRX Arms that are kind of pushing the gun culture 3.0 is what I've heard a lot of people refer to it as. And I kind of like that. So you have like your different phases, and our company has been in existence through a
couple different phases.
Yeah.
Where, it was like you were trying to, I can't remember. Someone made a post about it. Basically, it was one of the TRX Arms guys, I think. But he was basically talking about, it was like a younger generation trying to find their way into the gun community, and that was through like concealed carry, like all about like concealment and everyday carry stuff. But then it's like kind of opened up into more of like not like a like a Minuteman concept.
Yeah.
You know, so actually having the gear to, you know, preserve the Second Amendment and all our constitutional rights. So,
and beyond that, even, you know, just God-given rights.
Yeah.
I think that's, you know, and that's something we'll definitely touch and dive into in a little bit. But I think the shift in the culture is something that I think Stephen and I have always valued, you know, a lot of that, this new kind of mentality that's coming out.
Yeah, it was just more, it was almost like behind closed doors more. Like
Yeah.
you almost didn't want to talk about it as much before because you were kind of categorized in this weird, you know, whether you got thrown in as a boomer, like, because everyone was like, oh, if you got all this old military gear, you're just a FUD. And it's like, not actually, because some of the stuff works. Like some of this stuff that was issued by the military actually works really well. Some of it was trash.
Yeah.
Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
I mean, we know better than most.
Yeah.
If you're in the military, you know.
Yeah.
So there's some gear, it's like, I want to keep that when I get out. If I can somehow keep that, I will.
Yep.
And then there's some gear, it's like, dude, you can have that back.
Yeah.
And any of the extra ones I've commandeered over the time that I've been here.
Yeah, and it seems like the stuff that you don't want to keep, they don't take back.
Yeah,
they're like,
exactly.
I'm turning this back in. No, you get to keep that.
Like all my multicam issued stuff, I didn't get to keep, but somehow I got a bunch of ACU.
You just have all your trash moon camo.
Like, dude, what am I gonna do? Like, go blend in on grandma's couch or something? Like, this stuff's useless.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so true. Yeah, I got to keep some of my OCP issue, but or multicam stuff, but yeah, not much of it. But no, yeah, and that's exactly right. So Stephen and I both were in the military, and we'll get into that too. We kind of want to introduce ourselves to some extent, just because, in a way, this is like an episode 1 to the new version of the podcast. And so for some people tuning in for the first time, this is your episode 1. So we're going to do a little bit of that. But I think Stephen and I have always had this mentality. But, you know, a couple of years ago, from a business perspective, it wasn't, I don't know if I want to say smart, but it was, you didn't get a lot out of, you know, preaching some of these tried and true tactics, or talking about like readiness on the level of like rifleman skills, rifleman/infantryman skills. You know, it was borderline not even accepted for the reasons you said. You were viewed as a FUD. You
were labeled as a FUD, or just like a prepper, or
like a crazy guy.
Yeah, like a tinfoil hat guy, you know?
Yeah.
So it was very like, if you did it, it was kind of behind closed doors, where now it's becoming, which is good, I think, but it's becoming more regular among like the community, I would say. And I mean, we can thank kind of like the weird LARPing community for that. Not weird, but I mean, I like them. It's good. Weird, but you know, because I do it myself, so
yeah,
you know, we do it.
Yeah,
but you know, it kind of like made people realize, like, okay, it's okay to be weird. You know,
because it's not weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome. I really like the shift, and it's really cool to see, because I think at the time too, you know, it was weird for ex-military guys like us to do, because you got like a little bit of the hate from your own peers. Like, dude, what are you doing? Like, are you serious? You're talking about METC? Like, what? Like, what in the world?
Yeah.
Like, go read the Ranger Handbook and get back in the military. And then it was also weird for civilians, like civilian guys that are just genuinely trying to do, you know, trying to step up and do what they need to do. Then they had guys from, you know, civilian and military community being like, well, why don't you just go join the military? Like, what are you doing? You're playing Army, you know?
Yeah.
And that whole negative thing. And it's like,
so it kind of put it just put a lot of weird kind of tension on whichever background you came from, regardless, because you're getting hate if you're a civilian doing it, you're getting hate if you're a military guy doing it, and then you were also like getting hated on, even from both sides, kind of like I don't know. It was kind of a weird time. Like when we first started the company, like there was almost like just because you're in the military doesn't mean you know gun stuff and stuff like that, which is true. Like you don't, just because you served doesn't mean you know everything about it. But if you served and you got out and started actually like researching the stuff and trying to better yourself,
stayed current
with the stuff, then you're coming from two different backgrounds. So you can say, okay, well, this actually worked really well when we're in, and it makes sense for what we've learned. Or this is trash, let's get rid of this. This is hot garbage, we don't want it.
Yeah.
And so it's giving you more perspective, I think. Prior military guys, if you're willing to continue to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you have more perspective on the overall picture.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because you nailed in on the key, which is never stop being a student. I think that's where people go wrong. You get, and it's from all walks of life. You get your guys that they work up to a point, and then they get to that point, and they're like, whatever predetermined goal or point they had in their head, they, from their perspective, make it. I'm using air quotes, and then they have nothing else to learn, but everything to offer. And then you get these guys that have, this false, I guess this ill-founded confidence in like offering what they know. In reality, it's like, man, you still got a lot to learn. Like, what you learned back in the 90s in the military was some solid stuff, but things have changed, my guy,
Yeah.
Or even like when we were in, I mean, I got out in 2013.
Yeah, and I got out in 14, so.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff that's changed, and if we hadn't stayed in it, and continue to learn, take classes where we can, and, work on stuff on our own, sharpen our own skills together, people to hold you accountable, all that.
Yeah, having a community, having a group around you, because ultimately, iron sharpens iron. So, because not everyone's going to be on their on days. The more guys you have, it's just like going to the gym. If you got the best time the most effective time I had in the gym was when I had a group of guys that I was working out with.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when I was in the military, and they can hold you accountable, man. Like,
yeah.
Because you got off days all the time. Like, you're just going to have days where you just don't want to do it, which is same with the gun industry. Like, it's a little bit more fun. So it's like, at least for me, I don't really ever have days where I'm like, I don't want to go out in the woods and go shoot some guns and go work on this or that,
Mm-hmm.
But some days I'm like, you know what? It's trash outside. I don't really want to do it. Like, it's snowing and it's cold, or it's raining and it's cold.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think it's important to have a community around you, so that way you can, certain people are going to be better at different things. So you kind of balance each other out. But
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, just kind of like tying it back into the gun culture. It's been cool. Like, we've witnessed this conscious shift happen. And it's like, we were kind of joking about it, like a couple months ago. We were like, dude, screw it. Like, let's it was actually like right before the start of the new year. So we made it through, 2021, which was a really weird year because, all the COVID crap that was going on and all that stuff, and people like, oh, was it, still people kind of like pushing back, like, oh, well, it's pretty dangerous. Is it real? Is it not? And like, nah, it's just a cold, all that, like that whole thing. And then supply and demand from like a business perspective and from like a industry, in our industry, supply has been super damaged and affected.
Oh yeah.
And demand is nearly at an all-time high. I think demand has gone down a little bit since like 2020. I think 2020 the demand was insane, and then supply is still trying to catch up from that. But then 2021 demand, remained, and supply.
Yeah, it carried probably halfway through 2021, because you started seeing, like, from some of our distributors, like RSR, Ellipses, all those people that we get guns and stuff from. You started seeing things start to come back in stock.
Right.
Quantity numbers are starting to go back up. Ammunition starting to climb back up a little bit, but not as much as the firearms. Like, there for a while, you could get firearms, but you couldn't get ammo for that firearm. So
yeah,
That was kind of a weird thing.
And then vice versa. Yeah. So
Which then I also kind of fed into this culture as well, because I feel like a lot of people were like, well, what can I do with less ammo, like without shooting as much ammo?
Yep.
You know? So then, some of the recce kind of style stuff, which that got big last year. I think that's when everyone was like, oh yeah, recce,
Yeah.
So then guys were going out and kind of pushing their rifles to farther distances and
taking fewer shots,
kind of working on dope cards and just basic
known distance and stuff.
Yeah, basic recce kind of stuff a little bit,
It's funny because a lot of that stuff that I was seeing is in my opinion, just basic rifleman.
Yeah, it is
marksmanship.
People just label it as recce because
it's
they're
like, hey, I'm shooting at 500 meters. I'm a recce guy. It's like no,
you're a Marine infantryman now.
Yeah,
but that's like the basic level.
Yeah, well, and that's not supposed to be disparaging. That means
I'm just saying. But
no, I know. Yeah,
I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm just saying, like that's
that should be. You should be able to engage targets, within 100 yards and then out to 500 yards. That should just be part of your discipline as a rifleman, as someone that is armed with a carbine, or a rifle. So, those longer engagements, which you can make. I'm about to go down a rabbit hole, so I'll stop myself pretty quick here. But 5.56, you can push out to 800 yards and still be relatively effective. So,
yeah, as long as you're using the right ammunition, like if you're just out there running the 55 grain, then I don't know. Maybe not.
You probably start tumble rolling on you pretty quick.
Yeah. But
little light. But
then also like people started focusing on, radios, which is cool, man. We're getting into radios. We're getting into land navigation. We're getting into all things pretty basic infantryman skills, which is kind of funny, but it's like, oh, okay. So then a community of guys that were kind of like, oh, these guys don't know anything about concealed carry, which is true. Like a lot of the prior military guys, we didn't get handguns.
Mm-mm.
I mean, unless you were like an officer or something,
Yeah.
where you were randomly issued a handgun,
Some machine gun guys were, but
yeah, technically, I think our guys were supposed to, but none of them actually.
Like our 240 gunners
signed them out of the arms.
nines.
They actually did it though.
Yeah. No, I think so. Like, I'm trying to remember what we did over in Afghanistan, but
I'd say none of our guys ever signed them out. But I guess, yeah, most of like everything was stateside for me, so that's whatever. So, anyways, where I was going with that, I don't remember where I was going with that. Oh, but from the concealed carry side, didn't really know that much, but now with the 3.0 or whatever you called it earlier. It's like, oh, okay, some of the skills that I learned back then is actually pretty applicable for now.
Yeah.
So,
and it's stuff that I'm excited to see so many ex-mil guys willing to teach it. Like that's, they're offering this stuff up. And it's just kind of in a passive way. It's not like I'm sure it's out there, but I haven't seen very much like come pay to learn, the Ranger handbook skills, and stuff like that. It's very like, hey,
at least through social media. I mean, like there's awesome write-ups with great pictures on, how to do sectors of fire and all sorts of stuff. There's a bunch of guys out there. Like I encourage people to follow those guys because ultimately they need to grow their pages. Guys who are doing a really good job at giving information that's free. And it's easily, available. It's well done. It's well written up, and it's also good pictures and stuff. So
it's
an easy way to learn. I always encourage people like, Instagram is very liberal, and honestly shadow bans a lot of people, but there's still a lot of good information on it. Like
and kind of a tangent, but we need to continue to operate in those spaces. That we shouldn't. Just because we think, people that are a little more centrist or conservative or, right wing, I guess you could say, which isn't necessarily the case at all. But I see it mainly from the right wing kind of leaning people that are like, well, we should leave and make a new social media. It's like, no, because we need to stay in this space. We need to continue to operate in this space and try to push our message and try to, you know, in a good way, like have conversation, a healthy conversational way, talk to people and, you know, explain why we think the things we do and continue to influence in this space because...
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why pages like ours and other people's pages get shadow banned. It's because it's actually working.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to block the information if it's just going on to unheard ears.
Oh, yeah.
Like, getting shadow banned is, in a way, a compliment to your page.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just have a hater out there that, you know, always reports you or something. But
yeah. Which, who knows? But
yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened with us, but we're pretty blocked up. But
well, from what I could tell, it was, you know, our like our analytics and stuff. For our size, for our amount of followers, we had a huge reach. Like we are what do they call it? We have like native. It's whoever's following you. Like they have an analytic for, I can't remember the term for it, but or what Instagram uses, but there's a term
you
for
have like your followers and your unfollowers, and you can see
like domestic and non-domestic or something. So you have like people that already follow you. You can see how many of them are having reactions with your content. And before we got shadow banned, our non-domestic was massive. Like we had a lot of reach into just random areas for whatever reason. I have no idea why. I think it was kind of just luck, but once that kind of started to trend, we ended up getting shadow banned, and now we can't be tagged, and some people are limited to how many comments they can make on our content. So Classic just shut down stuff, which is a bummer, and it's affected business and stuff like that, but we're going to continue to operate there. I think it's, you know, the things we've been talking about are things that Steven and I are trying to do. And to kind of circle back, at the end of 2021, we sat down and we're like, all right, we want to kind of revamp our Instagram and revamp our kind of trajectory as a company in a way, and a lot more education focus. It's the stuff that Steven and I have always been passionate about. I mean, we love like innovating and manufacturing new stuff. For those that don't know, we both own Dynamic Defense Solutions, and we manufacture holsters like Kydex holsters and soft goods. And then we have a lot of different little prototypes, ideas and stuff that we're working on. But I think the biggest thing we've really been passionate about the whole time is training and education, and within ourselves, like pursuing it for ourselves and doing research and stuff, and kind of looking at what we learned in the past, what we did in the past, and kind of applying it to what's modern, and learning new concepts and things, from different people, but then also providing a service to people within our kind of audience, and saying like, hey, here's things you can do. So yeah, if you've been following us, you've noticed, obviously right now you're noticing the podcast change a little bit, which is going to play into that in a massive way. Our whole Instagram completely changed. Instagram removed a lot of our pictures and stuff randomly, but we just went through and basically archived everything. So pretty much all of our old content and how we were doing stuff is just gone. And every post we make from now on will have some kind of educational, informational benefit to it. I'm going to try to stick with that quality over quantity. We don't, right, as of right now, we're not doing like daily posts or anything like that, but everything we post is well planned out, thought out. We go out, do photo shoot stuff, and come back in and do like craft posts and do write-ups.
And sometimes we get multiple photo opportunities in one of our like shoot days, like if we're going to this location, so we can do quite a bit in this certain area. But like you said, again, you still got to edit the pictures. You still got to do a write-up, which your write-ups you do all the write-ups. I don't ever touch them. So obviously the guy who speaks the most on the podcast is the guy who does the write-ups, because he's got way more information in that brain of his. So
I don't know about that, but
Well, I just don't like to spew it out, I guess, or something. I don't know.
Well, you have a lot of ideas. Like you've come up with a lot of like, hey, let's do
this.
And I'm like, oh, that's a sick idea.
But yeah, anyway, so he's good at making paragraphs and stuff, making them sound good. So it's time consuming though, is what I'm trying to get to. To do actually good, well thought out write ups where, for one, you only got a certain amount of space that you can fit them in, and then to get everything that you want to get put in there, you kind of have to like, all right, well, I'm going to delete this and change the way it's worded so that way I can fit it all in here. Because it's an important piece, you know.
That's the bane of my existence on those write-ups. Like, I'll be just going and going.
Which most people don't know that because no one actually writes that long of stuff on Instagrams, except for like the other companies that are doing kind of the same thing that we do. Because there's a few guys out there that have got really, really good pages. And if I could remember them, I'd drop out some names, but I don't know
they all
off
have
the top of my head.
One local, I believe he's local, is that I can remember off the top of my head is Moose Rider. He does a lot of like solid write-ups and posts and stuff. And is it Confucius V2 or something like that? He's another really good one.
Yeah, there's a bunch out there, man.
They all have they all have crazy names. No offense to them, but like a lot of them have these like kind of, they're unique names in a good way. But Operator is one. He's actually pretty established. It's like Op4. It's a mixture of Operator and Op4, but it's like Op4rater, I believe.
Okay.
His page.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, there's a lot of good pages. So we'll share them on our social media every once in a while. So if we're sharing a post, usually you can just click on it and go check them out.
Yeah.
But usually if we're sharing it, it's because we feel like it's good information or it was a really well done write up, and it's like, sweet, dude, I'm going to post that because why not? For one, it helps them grow. It gets the information out there, and it's content that we agree with. That we're okay with putting on our page for display, you know? So, yeah, it helps the community all the way around.
Yeah. So we made the change, made the conscious effort to start being a little more educational. Obviously we still are a business, so we still need to make money, and otherwise this stuff isn't possible, but so we're trying to find ways to do that effectively as well, but not, sacrifice what we're trying to do with getting information out there, kind of encouraging people, kind of helping nudge everyone in the right direction. Kind of progressing out of those older gun cultures into this newer gun culture of like, it's not about having 12 guns in your safe. It's about having a one or two solid, very quality platforms. And
you can have 12, but if you have 12, you better have everything else that goes with it.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
It's kind of where I'm at. Like, I try to tell people, guys who have, lots of guns and stuff, but they don't have, night vision, or they don't have radios, or they don't have whatever it may be, body armor, or, there's a bunch of gear that you can have. It's like, man, you're really like bottlenecking yourself by just having, a bunch of rifles, but you could have so much more. Like, you could have so much more capability with one rifle.
Mm-hmm.
If you just sold maybe 1 or 2, 3 rifles.
Yeah. And it's usually like, and obviously this doesn't apply to everybody, but usually the guys that have, dozens of rifles, they're all slick rifles. They got iron sights on them, and that's it. And sometimes not even that. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, sell those things off and use the money to get a good optic and get good lighting system, get a couple good quality switches, a good muzzle device, suppressor, IR. If you got IR, if you're planning on going IR, then IR aiming capabilities, make sure you can aim passively and actively, things like that just start to just snowball effect into a lot of money. And it's like, yeah, it's a ton of money. Everybody looks at that price tag and they're like, oh, and it's like, well, yeah, but you got, dozens of rifles that you in your safe that, you shoot a couple of them here and there, but
yeah. And if you don't have that stuff, then probably because what you're trying to get toward, just because I'm not saying that you need to just like, all right, sorry kids, we're not eating this week,
Yeah, like, don't be stupid.
Yeah. like obviously if it's not within your budget, then you can't afford it. Then if it's something that you're actively working toward, then ultimately you're attempting to get there. So I think, basically that shift, I think, is catching on throughout the gun community, especially, TRX Arms is a huge company and they've helped shift that culture.
Yeah.
There's some, Grand Thumb, you're kind of your
Warrior Poet.
Yeah, Warrior Poet Society, John Lovell. All your guys who are kind of like the head of the spear right now for pushing this. Props to them, because ultimately it may have not gone that direction if it wasn't for those, key people. I mean, it could have been someone else that stepped up if it wasn't for them. There's always more people, but I'm just saying, like, kudos to them for sending people in the right direction, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think, you really got to pay respect where it's due for TRX Arms, because, they've come such a long way in such a short amount of time, and the amount of influence that company has on, and Lucas specifically, he's their CEO, if you don't know, which I feel like if you're listening to this podcast, you probably would know, but maybe not. Anyways, if you haven't heard of that company, definitely check them out. I mean, they're very big. They're very successful. They make us look like a flea, but anyways, Lucas from TRX Arms has a lot of influence on the much younger crowds, and he's doing a really cool, his idea, or kind of his tactic, you could call it, of like infiltrating and kind of using the gaming, like first person shooters, and like he just did a video on Tarkov, like, and how, like, I think it was called like How Realistic Is It? I haven't watched it. I've been meaning to watch it, but
yeah, I saw a snippet of it. He was basically talking about recoil management on fully automatic rifles or something, right? Something like that. Is that the one you saw of Tarkov, or did you just?
I just know he's been posting up, like,
so maybe he's been doing multiple, but that was the one I just glanced at. I saw like an Instagram short video of like a YouTube video.
It's probably from that video. I'm not sure. Like I said, I haven't watched it yet, but he's been posting up comments, people reacting to it and saying, yeah, like, playing Tarkov got me into guns. Playing, oh yeah, I thought guns were scary, but then I started playing Tarkov and I started like being more interested in guns, and then I found your video, So he's bridging the gap between our younger generation, who do a lot more gaming and things like that, and bringing them straight into this mentality. That's the thing, is it's not like, oh, you need to start right here and, own a few shotguns and then you get yourself a bolt action, and, it's skipping all that. It's going straight to like, okay, get an AR, put a good optic on it, put a light on it, all the things we talked about.
Yeah.
And, teaching them how to modernize. So it's such a cool, hats off to them for what they've done.
And he's a perfect person to do it, because he is a younger guy himself. Like, he's not much younger than me, but he is still younger, and he's more, I don't know. I'm kind of an old soul in a way. Like, yeah. I'm young, but I'm not like, I got hard miles on me, so that's just the way it is. Like, most people come in, they would never guess I'm as young as I am.
Yeah.
So
we both look old as the hills.
Yeah, but I think just jumping out of airplanes and all the good stuff we've done. So
he went straight out of his teenage years into like business building.
Yeah, exactly. So
whereas we went into volunteering to just get treated like little children and get beat up for several years. So yeah. Which on that, let's jump right into talking about our background a little bit.
All right. Yeah, well, I might let you start it off, because I kind of just followed your footsteps. So
okay. Well, let me back up. So Steven and I are brothers, which is pretty cool. Like, I feel like I'm gonna start there, because obviously we own this company together. We're 50-50. We're co-founders, and then we're 50-50 owners, and which is pretty awesome. And we get that comment a lot, like, dude, how do you, like, I've had people be like, yo, how do you run a company with your brother? Man, I would like my brother and I would get in fights all the time, and it's like, no, it's literally like perfect. Like we somehow we complement each other like perfectly. And honestly, we don't really fight about much. Like there's little disagreements and there's little classic, just like, well, like, no, I don't want to do that. Well, dude, that's stupid, And there's like some of that happens, but it's just, that's basically all it ever is, which is pretty cool. So, yeah, we're brothers. We grew up together. We come from a really good family. We're blessed with two amazing parents, and we had a large household. So I'm the oldest, and then Steven, and then we have two more brothers under that, Andrew and David, and then we have a sister who's the youngest, and her name's Lydia. And so we grew up in, with a lot of siblings, and Steven and I kind of like stuck together because we were kind of like the upper echelon. That's just so superior. No, we were just like the two older brothers, and we were pretty close in age. We're only like 2 years apart, I think. So, and then Andrew and David kind of stuck together because Andrew is several years younger than Steven, but then David's only a couple years younger than Andrew. So they kind of stuck together. And so that's just kind of the way it was. So, we grew up in a missionary family. So, we had to cram into some small houses, and Steven and I were always sharing bedrooms. So we're just always together forever. So it was, It
was kind of forced. It was forced our whole life, so now we've just accepted it at this point.
Yep.
So
yeah, we still sleep in the same room. And,
it's a little weird for our wives, but
no. So, my junior year. Well, honestly, since we were both kids, we were both always acting like we wanted to go into the military, and we played army and as little kids and. What?
I'm just laughing about that. All right.
We used to take our Red Ryder BB guns and pop open the lever, the air pump, and tape. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Take duct tape.
Take duct tape and
the lever,
tape the thing closed. And
then make it look like a magazine, so we could kind of pretend that our Red Ryder BB guns were like...
Well, no, it wasn't even the Red Ryders. It was just those weird... I had a Red Ryder as well, but... Which I'm sure we did it with that as well, but we just had those weird little... It was literally just an air pump sound. Like you cocked it and it just built air pressure and it was just like... Thump.
Oh, I'm talking about not even... I remember those, but I'm talking about literally taking the Red Ryders. We pulled that lever down and then taped it up to make it look like a magazine. Made the lever look like a magazine.
Yeah.
And then pretended it was like an M16 or something.
Yeah.
So, but if you pulled the trigger like that lever would come back and just... Blah! Just smack your fingers. And just destroy you. But... so it was good times. But anyways, so my junior year in high school, honestly, it was all the way back at 9/11. I remember, I think I was in 5th or 6th grade, saw 9/11 happen on TV in the classroom.
Yeah, we were in North Carolina at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember them, because you were in what grade you said?
Either 5th or 6th. I think 5th. I think 5th grade.
How many grades are we apart?
2? Yeah, 2.
No, I was in 2nd grade, I thought. Or was I in 3rd grade? Maybe I was in 3rd grade.
You were under my wife's class, right? One under her?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were 2 grades apart.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was in 3rd grade, I guess.
Yeah. So I remember them bringing in like an old school TV.
Yep.
Bringing it into the classroom. And
on one of those weird carts.
Yep. And... I sat there and watched that, and I remember being so mad and being like what kind of people would do this? And that was a big shift for me of like, yeah, I'm going to go into the military when I'm old enough. And, things would change and, I would learn more as I grew out of that super young, borderline innocent age in 5th grade. And, but yeah, basically my junior year of high school, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. So started doing research and signed up as soon as I was old enough to, which at the time you could sign up when you were 17, but then you couldn't, with like parents' approval, but then you're not able to go anywhere, I think, until you're 18 or something like that. I can't remember how that exactly worked, but I ended up signing up.
You were allowed to go when you were 17.
Yeah, maybe.
Because didn't Vrooman go overseas with you when he was 17?
I don't remember if he was 17 or not, but I don't think he was that young. but
he was a young kid.
I know that I was in basic with like 17-year-olds. So, but they had to get like a waiver to go.
Yeah.
But anyways, I joined up, and basically they said, well, when you finish high school, you can go. So, I joined the Army, and I joined up as a 11 Bravo, so an infantryman, and then I got airborne school in my contract, and my original plan was to go into the Rangers, but basically when I was signing up, I had a master sergeant say, he's like, hey, are you sure you want to be a Ranger? He's like, if you want to be a Ranger, this is how long your contract's going to be, which was a lot longer than my 5. I think it was like going to be, they were going to require probably 7 years or something.
6 or something.
Yeah. At the time, I think it was like 7, but because I also got a pretty spicy bonus at the time, so it had to do with that and retention and all that weird crap. But he was like, you can always just drop a Ranger school packet, or you can Ranger selection packet while you're in. He's like, go in, go to your unit, get some experience, and then if you still want to become a Ranger, then do it. Which was good advice, because I didn't end up wanting to become a Ranger. But anyways, so became an infantryman, went to basic training, went to airborne school, and then I got stationed at Fort Richardson. So I was in the 501st in Alaska. So I remember my drill sergeants making fun of me. They were like, haha, you have to go to Alaska. And I was like, yeah, but that's home, so that's cool with me. And I had a girlfriend at the time, so she's now my wife, so that worked out. But so I had a lot of reason to want to come back to Alaska, and I've always loved Alaska. So yeah, I was stationed up here in Fort Richardson in the 501st, and airborne infantryman. Like my first jump up here out of airborne school was in the Arctic Circle, so it was straight up polar bears and stuff running around. No, but just way out in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, a lot of airborne operations in the snow, a lot of that crap, and then ended up getting deployed in 2011. Yep, 2011, and came back in 2012. So I was over there for just about a year, and over in Coast Province, just outside of Fob Salerno, for those that know. So, and I was actually there when Fob Salerno got hit really hard. They got hit by a V-bid, and we were like 12 clicks out, and we actually spun up QRF to respond to Salerno, which I always thought was weird because we were at a really tiny little combat outpost, and they were like, we got to do QRF for Salerno, which Salerno is like a big FOB, which is a forward operating base. And we were like, what? Like, what's going on? Because they got all kinds of stuff, and they got SF dudes there, Rangers are there, and all kinds of air assets like launch out of there. So they basically had it all under control by the time we got there. It was just the way it was done. But they got hit by VBID, which is a vehicle-borne IED, basically packing a bunch of explosives into a car, and which in this case it was like a big box van, and they like drove that thing right up to the HESCO barriers, the big like external barriers, and just it was like 2,000 pounds of explosives just blew a big hole in the side of this thing, and then attacked the base with a bunch of like individual personnel with like RPGs and suicide vests and stuff. Thankfully, they were so close to the blast that they ended up being all jacked up. They were like bleeding out their ears and disoriented, and they ended up getting smoked pretty easily. I think they only ended up losing one guy, and I think he was a contractor. I apologize if I got that wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was just 1 or 2 people that were casualties. So from that specific incident, but anyways, yeah. So that's the time frame I was there, doing. Main mission there was trying to train up the local Afghans to take over their country and fight for their own, democracy, and which that was didn't really didn't work in the long run, but doing a lot of that. We had some targets that we went and wrapped up and did some good stuff while we were there. So then got back and finished out my military career, ended up getting out just right at about 5 years, decided to call it a day and move on. My wife was ready for me to be home a lot more, and we were ready to kind of move on. And so I started pushing into firearms instruction and learning a lot more about a lot of that. I was a designated marksman while I was in, so pushing into more long range stuff. Then I started getting into some like competition shooting and doing, you know, a lot of work with handguns, which there wasn't a lot of that while I was in. And some of that was done, you know, I'd say the last like year and a half before I got out. Me and a couple of my other military buddies, really close buddies, were every weekend we'd go out and do like 3-gun shoots and 2-gun shoots and steel challenge and stuff like that, and working on manipulation. The Magpul Dynamics, the old Magpul Dynamics videos with Chris Costa and Travis Haley were like very influential in like
the Bible.
us getting into that. So it was super old school, like modern isosceles, like super like hunched over dynamic shooting stances, you know. And but you got to start somewhere, and it got us. It kind of pulled us out of that like really old school kind of FUD shooting of just like teacup weaver, and you know, all you really had to go on at the time back before the military was like like movies, you know, old 90s movies and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, so did that and started getting into it, kind of developed a passion for that. Started helping some local instructors kind of as an assistant, then a coach, then started helping run classes, and you know, worked in some different training groups and stuff like that. Did some private security contracting for a little while, and then some like state contract stuff, like security transport kind of stuff, and then just, you know, basically got into the point where it was like, all right, I'd like to make some good consistent money. So I started getting into the construction trades and did that for several years, and yeah, and then basically we got to the point where we started starting this company, but I'll hold off on that, and we'll go into that a little bit, but I'll let Steven kind of talk about his background.
So yeah, rewinding all the way back to us in the same room, chilling, just being forced to live together. We then went on to, he went off to the military back in 2000, you said 9? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So 2009. When did I enlist? Did I enlist in 2009? Or did I enlist in 2010? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I enlisted as soon as I basically could. I know I was a junior in high school. I just turned 16 because I was kind of like young for my grade. So I just turned 17. So I had turned 17 like right before I graduated my junior year, and I went and enlisted before the end of my junior year. So I left, I think 2 weeks after graduation. I ended up going to basic training after the end of my senior year. Same thing, the 11 Bravo, got airborne in my contract. I was not fortunate enough to end up in Alaska. If I had, I would have just deployed with you, which I don't think they would have let happen anyway. So, because I got done with basic and AIT like right before you had deployed.
They would have. We just would have been in different companies.
Yeah, I don't think anyone from my airborne class that I went through basic and AIT with went to Alaska. Like, I don't think a single person did, which is weird.
Yeah, I think there's only like 6 of us that did, and it was a super small amount.
So I ended up where all airborne guys end up, and that's Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Except for the few lucky ones that get to go to Italy, which that would have been cool too. But
yeah, Vicenza.
Yeah, so I went to, originally was supposed to go to 4th Brigade, but as soon as I got to Fort Bragg, they switched my orders up, ended up sending me to 3rd Brigade, which is whatever, I guess. Looking back, I was mad, but 4th Brigade at the time was deploying pretty heavily, and I was like, oh yeah, that's where I want to go. I want to go to 4th Brigade, but didn't happen. I ended up going to 3rd Brigade, ended up getting put in the 573, which is like a Cab Scout group, but they had a company of infantrymen, so Charlie Troop or company or whatever you want to call it, was then an infantry, all infantry guys. So I ended up getting put in that, which was reconnaissance for basically for the entire brigade. We were the reconnaissance group for the brigade. So your Cav Scout guys were in vehicles doing reconnaissance where we were on foot, and was our purpose for the infantry guys. We did all our recon work on foot, which was unique, as an infantryman, because you're kind of doing different stuff than what your normal infantryman skills are. So a lot of recon work, doing hide sites, serve sites, all that fun stuff. Trying not to get seen. So did that for the whole time I was in, which was just short of 4 years. And never got deployed. I was put on Global Response Force the entire time I was in, pretty much. Anytime they would take us off, we'd be back on within like 2 months. Where they're supposed to rotate that between the brigades and Fort Bragg. That's like how it's designed. It's supposed to go, every year it's supposed to switch to a different brigade, and you're not supposed to stay on it for a long period of time. But somehow, I don't know what was going on. Either our leadership was, like, high up leadership was, something was weird there, or they liked to keep us at home because we were staying out of trouble. I don't know what it was. But ultimately, we didn't get deployed. And we got jerked around a lot saying, yeah, you guys are going, you guys are going, you guys are going. And then we just never went. So by the time it kind of was like time for me to re-enlist if I wanted to, they were like, oh, we got another deployment. We're going to Iraq. And I'm like, yeah, I've heard that.
Are we though?
I've heard that 1,000 times. So no, I'm good. I'll pass. I'm going to get out. They actually did end up deploying, like literally 6 months after I got out. I could not believe it. I was like, no way, they actually going, but whatever. From what I've heard, not really. It wasn't anything exciting over there, so it was pretty calm times. In 2015, they ended up deploying, so
okay.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it would have been an experience for me, but I don't know. I was kind of just like, I'm done. I'm ready to be out. I was done jumping out of airplanes and all that good stuff. I was like, yeah, I'm over it.
Yeah.
So, got out. You were kind of pushing into what you were pushing into as far as like training and all that stuff. So I was like, man, that would be fun. I got nothing going on. I was single. So,
yep.
I came back to Alaska, was like, yeah, I'm going back home. And you kind of started pulling me in with all the guys that you were training with at the time. And things went from there to us doing this now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and as far as like DDS goes, Dynamic Defense Solutions, like how that started was kind of interesting too, because I was working with another guy, and I was kind of wanting to push into like training and stuff and be an instructor. I'd just gotten my instructor ratings and shotgun, handgun, rifle, and then some like, self-defense, some different self-defense instructor certifications and stuff. And so I was trying to push into that and make that my job, because at the time I was by this point, I was, doing construction as a day job, and, I didn't want to do that forever. So Steven and then another guy who's a mutual friend of ours named Cody kind of said, hey, well, we kind of want to start making holsters. I was like, ooh, okay. So basically we want to do a podcast, talk about the actual like origins of the company and like some of the things we've done along the way. We want to bring Cody in, but so I won't get too deep into it, but I was like, well, hey, let's do like let's combine forces. Let's do some like designing, some innovation and stuff like that, make some new products, make some holsters. Then I'll come in and do some of the training kind of stuff, and then we can all start doing that together too. So yeah, we basically started like that, and there's a 3-part ownership, and at some point, Cody I think decided that, like I said, we'll bring him on, so he'll probably explain better on his end. But just basically, he was like, man, I just don't know if I want this to be a full-time gig. I kind of wanted this to be more of a hobby, something that we did on the side.
Yeah.
He has a really good job, and, no reason to grind super hard to try to get full-time just to take what essentially would be a pretty massive pay cut, really, and just to try to make this thing work, So I think he just decided like, hey, no harm, no foul. Like, this was fun. You guys keep going. Like, keep charging forward. And so he stepped away a couple of years ago, and now it's just been me and Steven.
Actually, pretty much like right before our podcast started.
Yeah.
He pretty much had stepped away at the beginning of that year of 2018. So 2018 was a big shift for us too as a business, but also then I forgot I also went into the Department of Corrections as well. So there's that as well.
That's a pretty big thing.
So, which has given me a different kind of experience, but it's been good. I mean,
a little more law enforcement minded.
Yeah, you learn a lot more about. Luckily, where I work, because I'm in a pretrial setting, I deal with, I mean, I don't know if it's luckily, but I get to learn probably more because of that. Like, I get to learn laws and because you're booking people in, and then also you're dealing with, not so sober people all the time. So you're dealing with a lot of like, mental health, a lot of, people that are on some pretty crazy drugs, giving them insane strength or just kind of crazy or whatever it may be. You're having to kind of detain them and stuff like that. So more hand-to-hand kind of stuff, just learning how to, manipulate people and stuff like that. But so it's different. It's definitely way different. Like it's, everything you do, you have to write reports for and all this stuff. I don't know. We're in the military. You don't have to do any of that. It was just like, all right, you got the job done.
Yeah.
It's like,
good job.
Which I appreciate that, but because I hate the paperwork, but you got to do it when you're dealing with American, citizens and stuff like that. I understand where it comes from. Keeps everyone in check. So,
yep, for sure. Yeah. So, basically after, Steven and I took over the business, we kind of started making, just kind of heading where we're headed now. I think it kind of started back then in a way, Yeah.
Cause we had the potential for some contracting gigs that we about got, which was super exciting for me because when I got out, I didn't have anything lined up for work. I was kind of just like banking on the fact that Alaska is good for oil. And at the time I got out, it was not great, but I thought it was going to be better. And it was harder to get a job than I thought. So when I got out, I was kind of excited. Like you were like, we could potentially get this contract and they're looking for prior military guys. And I mentioned your name and they're interested. So I was kind of like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was single. So I was like I said before, I was single coming out of the Army. So I was super excited to be like, oh, dude, I could be making some really good money and kind of fill that void of me not getting to deploy ever. Because when I first got out, I'm not going to lie, I was pretty frustrated with the fact that I just spent 4 years in the military and didn't get to do what I wanted to do. So it's kind of like, and it's not really, it is what, like I've learned to cope with it now. Like it doesn't affect me really anymore, but it is like, I don't know, at the time I was just like, man, what a waste of time, for me is how I thought. But now that we're running this business, it's given me like, okay, well, there was like, it gave me a whole bunch of training and skills and things that I think helps me with this business now, So.
Yeah. Cause your guys' training tempo was insane. Like it
was crazy.
Like, I'm not even exaggerating. Like I could almost never get a hold of Steven on the phone. Like I'd try to call him and check in and
I got to work with cool guys, like because, we directly worked with a lot of SF teams because we were on Fort Bragg. I can't remember which groups down there on Bragg, but it doesn't really matter. Anyways, we got to work with them, whether it was doing reconnaissance for a bunch of buildings they were going to hit, because they had all these like mock villages in Bragg, like all over the place. Anyone that's been to Fort Bragg knows, like it's crazy. Like you go to shoot houses and stuff, and it's like, dude, I've never actually been to the shoot house. I don't know how I haven't been to the shoot house yet, but it's like, how do they have so many? I mean, how because it's huge, but they have so many properties, whether it's ranges. They have tons of, I don't know how many drop zones they have. They have like 7 or 9 drop zones that are huge. Like it's like just ridiculous amount of land that Fort Bragg owns for training. But so we got to do that. We did some water stuff with some SF teams too. They have I could drive right to it, but I couldn't tell you road names. I suck with road names, but I could drive right to it. But they had this little building that we'd go over to, and they'd teach us. They had like private contractors that were teaching us how to, patch our boats because we had Zodiacs and stuff like that. Patch our boats and just do a bunch of random stuff. Like my unit was trying way too hard, but at the same time, like looking back on it, like I got some pretty cool training out of it. So,
dude, yeah, you were in such a unique unit because I definitely got more of the big army, like airborne infantrymen experience. I think in a way, like Steven would send me pictures and they'd be like all like completely covered in face paint and like wearing BDUs with like Alice packs, and I was like, what era are you in?
Yeah, we went back to like the 80s and 90s.
But I remember thinking, I would show my buddies and be like, dude, look at my brother's unit. And they're like, what? I'm like, I know, dude. I'm like, what in the world? Then here we are wearing our stupid ACUs and our Molly rucks.
Yeah.
Squeaking around.
Plastic frames.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, at the time I was mad. I was mad I was in that unit because I was looking at 4th Brigade. And I was there for, like I said, just under 4 years. And in that time, they deployed twice. So I was like, man, that's not a long contract. I wasn't in for very long. And they still got 2. I think one of them was a 12-year. No, it wasn't. Because just after 2012, they switched to 9 months. So I think they were 2 9-month deployments. But it doesn't matter. Like, still, they got 2 deployments in the time I was there. And I had a lot of buddies that were over there. And I was so jealous. I was like, man. But it is what it is. Ultimately, it wasn't meant to be, so it's kind of like whatever. But I got, now looking back on it, it's like, dude, I didn't get the normal, just run-of-the-mill infantryman experience because I was doing all sorts of, like, we did.
Yeah, like boat stuff? Dude, I didn't do any of that. I mean, we did, like, water jumps, but that's the closest thing to the water I did while I was in.
Yeah. Yeah, we did a lot of water stuff randomly, but lots of land navigation, lots of the stuff that, the recce stuff, like that stuff we worked on a ton, like all the stuff that is kind of popping up now. It's kind of weird because it's like, dude, this is all stuff I did like all the time. Like, and that was another thing with being on GRF is when you're on Global Response Force, like you'll talk to guys who were in before 9/11 happened. And it's like they talk about, the training cycle was way more ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. Because when you're deploying, when you're trying to go to Afghanistan and Iraq, okay, we know the enemy who we're fighting. We know kind of the terrain, what we're dealing with, all the stuff. So you can train very specifically to what the enemy that you're fighting. Where if you're training to, you don't know who your enemy is. Like before the war, they don't know who they're fighting. So their training is a little bit more broad and way more. They have to do way more training in order to be ready for different environments and stuff like that. So being on Global Response Force, it kind of we were treated that way. We had way more funding, and they constantly just were training constantly. Like I was working all the time.
Because what was your? You guys could deploy anywhere in the world in how much time? It was a super short amount of time. Like literally from like, because you had to keep like AB bags packed, right?
Yeah, we had AB bags packed all the time. They could call us at. So we had to be like, I think at like the pack shed, which is like where we did all our airborne jumps. I think we had to be there within like everyone assembled within 24 hours or something. Which doesn't seem like crazy a lot, but that's an entire brigade doing that,
that's a ton of people.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
Thousands of people.
So, so we were kind of on call. That was another thing that was a little frustrating is like, just not. So 3rd Brigade, some of 3rd Brigade deployed when I was there as well. Like 2 Panther, which was like an all-infantry group. They deployed to, I think, Afghanistan in 2012 or 13. But it was just them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did they supplement somebody or something?
So they went over there to, I don't know what they did. I'd have to ask someone. I had a couple buddies over there too, but I don't really know. I don't know if they were just going over there to be like, to help a different brigade. Like they were, like I think that's actually what it was. I think
I guess it's a whole brigade. So, like, because I mean, we were just a brigade.
Battalion.
Oh, it was a battalion. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they must have been supplementing somebody or something.
Yeah, I think they deployed with another brigade, like second brigade or something. I'm just making this up, but I don't know what it was. But
yeah.
Like second brigade from the 82nd deployed, and they needed another battalion for whatever it may have been. Like, who knows?
Yeah,
could have been just QRF. I don't know.
Right.
They just brought them over for whatever it was.
Yeah.
2P happened to get selected. Because at the time when we were over there, reconnaissance wasn't really needed. Like they pretty much, like they knew where everything was at.
Yeah,
so it's like for us to get used. Like I remember at the time my squad had the best PT scores. We were dominating like every mission we'd go on. My squad leader at the time was Christopher Roberts, who is now, he owns a company called CR2. So check them out if you ever get a chance. But they do like long range shooting.
Yeah, CR squared.
Or CR squared, whatever.
Yeah.
So he got really big up in the Army as far as like dealing with sniper contracts and stuff like that. I'd like to get him on the podcast at some point. It would be fun. But anyways, he was like putting in pretty heavily to like get us to go deploy because for whatever reason they needed just one squad. So there was talk of them deploying just one squad, which would have been sweet.
Yeah.
I don't know what we would have been doing. It probably would have been like cake deployment, but whatever. I was like, dude, if we get this, that'd be so sick. But he was pushing really hard.
Dude, one squad?
Yeah.
Dude, that would have been so like specialist, you know? That would have been like,
I don't know what we would have been doing.
You probably would have been like some like weird security or something for some
dude, I wouldn't have even cared. I wouldn't have even cared. I would have just been like, whatever. No, but yeah, so it didn't happen, but it doesn't really matter ultimately. We got a lot of training. We had to stay active, so we had to like do still your like whether it's JRTC. So like we went to JRTC once, we went to Fort Pickett a couple times, which is up in Virginia. Same kind of concept though. You're dealing with OPFOR and stuff like that up there. And Fort Pickett was actually a ton of fun because their regulations on explosives are very like lacking. Like there's no regulations, I don't think. Like we got to set off claymores like in the minimum distance that's like required for you to be behind a claymore, which I think was like, I don't know, like 15. What is it?
Probably.
Feet? I don't know.
It's not very much.
Yeah, it's stupid close. I know that, but
that's why there's literally a side of the claymore that says, you know, face toward enemy or something like that.
Yeah, I'd have to look up exactly what it was. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I remember being stupid close, and I was like, this might be a really bad idea, but I don't know. Like, who cares? Whatever. They say you can do it, so let's do it. but yeah, so we stayed very busy. But like what I was going to say, though, just like prior to the war, those guys always say, oh, the Army was way different back then because blah, 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 like some of the old salty guys, you know. We trained way more, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, yeah, it's because you were training for something you didn't know what to train for, so you had to do different types of training to understand, like to be effective regardless of where you go. So we got that kind of same treatment, which was cool looking back on it, but at the time I hated it because I was like...
Yeah, that's kind of how it always is.
I wish I wasn't so just disgruntled at the time, but that's just
part of the culture, man.
Yeah,
I think
it is. Yeah, just being pissed
and it develops that camaraderie. You know, you build such a strong bond with people because
everyone's angry.
You're in the suck together. You know, you're just there and you hate being there, and you're like, ugh, and then you just laugh about it and just kind of fight through the pain.
Yeah. but anyways, enough about our old selves and
yeah. Well, I mean, long story short, it seems like you did come out of the military with stuff because you obviously got all these special skills. And honestly, in my opinion, you know, as we've been looking more into this and we've been coordinating with others, it's like the skills you learned are way more applicable to your everyday person and what they should be learning as far as like dealing with like a bigger player or dealing with a more conventional force potentially.
It's because what I was trying to do was to be as opposed to going to Afghanistan or Iraq, where you kind of are the big kid on the block when we went over there.
Absolutely.
We were trying not to be the big kid on the block. We were trying to be the new kid on the block that's got to kind of establish dominance, which is kind of the same thing for, going kind of getting back to the main reason of this podcast, being Minutemen. Yep. We will, like, if an event happens where you happen to be a Minuteman and have to, get your arms and have to, rock and roll.
Dude, what was that?
Dude, I have no idea.
I didn't see anything happen.
I think one of the bungees on this mic just like popped or something. I don't know. Anyways, that kind of threw me off. But anyways, so if you're actually having to, like, whether it's, Russia invades or
yeah,
whatever it may be, like if it's foreign or domestic, long story short, you're not going to be the big kid on the block. Like,
absolutely not.
You're going to be using more guerrilla warfare style stuff, honestly, kind of that Revolutionary War style where, yeah, we might have been outnumbered and whatnot, but
yeah, that kind of leads into, like, why Minuteman? Like, why Minuteman? Why did we pick that? Well, I mean, a big reason is, like, what Steven started to really detail on was historically, and well, first let me say, I feel like the Minutemen kind of thing has a bad connotation. It's kind of like militia. And I don't think it should. I think it's childish and silly that it has a negative connotation. And that's, like, a big part of why we decided to take the marketing risk, I guess, of naming our podcast, rebranding our podcast from DDS Unscripted to Minutemen Initiative. And we're going to kind of get into why as we talk about this. But as far as the risk, like, why is it a risk? Well, because there's a lot of negative connotation surrounding that word. But we wanted to use it because there shouldn't be. It should be an accepted term and an accepted mentality. And I think it's a very historically relevant mentality. And you can look back at what, our ancestors did in the colonial days going into the Revolutionary War and kind of how they looked at it and apply that to today. So, like, historically, what were the Minutemen? Well, they were basically everyday people. And it's cool too, because they weren't, there were organized militias. There were actual, like, required to serve militias. But then in supplement to that, you had men that would maintain their own arms, their own equipment.
Yeah, they weren't issued anything.
No.
It's all their personal gear.
Yep, their own clothing, their own armament, and they would be ready at a minute's notice. So they had this stuff so well maintained and so well practiced and so well disciplined and dialed in that at a minute's notice, they would be ready to fight. They were highly mobile, could mobilize, very quickly on horseback or even on foot, prepared their environment, their local environment for people attacking, built strong positions. These were things that they did in advance. These were things that were already done. They weren't things that they waited until the last minute. They had fortified their communities and were then themselves ready to deploy at a minute's notice.
Yeah. They also tended to be younger in age, which made them more mobile. And not saying that if you're older, listen to this podcast, that, oh, you're just screwed, because honestly, nowadays, people are living longer than they did during that time frame. Mm-hmm. And also, especially for at least men, like nowadays, shoot, you're sometimes just now getting to the best you ever will be when you're like 40 with how
much health, like, focus there is.
Yeah,
now.
Health focus, like there's guys who are in their 40s and they're just absolute machines, dude. And you're like, dang, dude, good for you.
There's a lot of new studies that have come out that said that, like, if you've ate healthy and you work out daily and you're very, like, strict about your physical fitness, your physical prime can be met in your 40s.
Yeah.
You know, as long as you've had, you know, there's a point where if you just slop around for too long,
it's not going to matter.
Then, yeah. Then you'll just be a sloppy mess. But
what I was getting at too is even if you're older, it doesn't mean that your time to shine is done, because honestly, knowledge is ultimately like what needs to be passed down to younger generations, whether you have kids or, you know, relatives that are younger, or you have some sort of pull within a group of younger individuals. It's like you can influence them and teach them. You know, I think that's so important to pass down to your kids, and I plan to pass down to my kids. I know you plan to pass down to your kids. So, so it never, this same mentality won't die, you know?
Yeah.
And anyways, yeah, that's all I was getting to on that is, you know, age. I mean, ultimately age is going to eventually matter. You're going to get to a certain point where you can't fight anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, you can try, but I'm just saying you're not going to be as effective as someone if someone's a squared away in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, you know?
Yep. Yeah. And so applying that, the things that were in our history, in our country's history, and kind of that mentality and that discipline into today's modern age, well, what does that look like? Well, it looks a lot the same. I mean, the very first thing is it's individual responsibility. It's looking at the situation and looking at, you know, what can you do as an individual? What are you responsible for as an individual? Well, ultimately, you are responsible for your own safety and your own freedom. That's like a huge cornerstone of what this country is. Going back to the colonists, you know, they were literally on their own, you know, building their own communities, living free, and they didn't have like, you know, money from the government and all this kind of stuff going on. It was them, you know, pioneering and doing their own thing. You know, we live in an age now where that's all been done for us to some extent. So, you know, we have a fantastic nation. We have a lot of really nice stuff. It's a nice day to be, you know, to be a human. It's a nice day and age to be a human. But there's also a lot of there's been a shift. There's been a shift of like, you know, personal responsibility is being attacked. Like people don't want you to be. They want you to be reliant. They want you to be subservient. They want you to be, you know, waiting for the support and relying on, you know, some government agency or entity to kind of tell you what to do. When I think this whole mentality comes back to that individual responsibility. Like I'm going to do what's right for me and my family and my local community. You know, I'm going to do what's right between me and God, you know, and that's where it starts. And then it starts to unravel from there, or I guess open up from there. You know, you have, just like they did, you have modern armament that's well maintained and well practiced with. You've got, you know, gear and equipment that you can be highly mobile and respond with. And your community has been established and coordinated, and you've got, you know, strongholds, so to speak, kind of pre-designated for if anything were to happen. And so I think it applies beautifully to now, and it should be, we should really take note of what our ancestors and forefathers and stuff did.
Yeah,
to kind of establish this country.
There's something pretty beautiful about the fact that how well, you know, the Minutemen in themselves actually, like, it worked, you know,
mm-hmm.
whether it be, you know, back when it kind of first started, when they were first like trying to, you know, we were first trying to get into America, you know, they were fighting Indians and stuff like that. Some of that might have been a little bit frowned upon, but hey, whatever. It's part of our history, so we're not going to just pretend like it didn't happen. So it happened. It's also the first time that American soldiers started getting snowshoes, which is awesome because I can't remember what Indian tribe they were fighting, but apparently they were trying to attack in the snow and it wasn't working. They lost a whole bunch of dudes and eventually realized, oh, we need snowshoes in order to fight effectively against these people. So, which is kind of cool. Which in Alaska, snowshoes are pretty important in order to fight well.
Yeah, they're mandatory.
Yeah, you just can't do it. Like we were trying to do a training exercise with a couple of the guys we work with, and we were gonna do like a bull flanking maneuver. We are doing some battle drill stuff, and went to try to push a group of guys up over the snowbank, and it was just deep snow, and it was like it'd been sunny out, so we had froze over the top layer. This is kind of a random tangent, but I just got to bring it up.
Yeah.
So it froze over the top layer, and you'd be walking, all of a sudden you just break through, and you'd sink like past your knees deep in snow, and then it would just happen over and over again, and it was just like you'd be smoked before you even got to where you were trying to go. So it was like almost pointless. Anyways, long story short, if you live in a place with snow, get snowshoes, because otherwise you're not going to be effective during the wintertime, and they'll wait till the wintertime if they're smart. Mm-hmm. So, anyways, where I was getting at. Oh, so that, then the French and Indian War, and then ultimately the Revolutionary War, which was like 17, whatever. I don't remember when the Revolutionary War, I probably should know that, but I can't remember off the top of my head. We don't have Caden here anymore for the history buff.
The rapid knowledge.
Yeah, dude. He was, he had all that stuff saved in his brain. But anyways, they ended up keeping the Minutemen like it was still a thing all the way up till 17 or something like that. So it's crazy how long that stayed in effect. And then in 1917, I think it was the date that they kind of switched it over to the National Guard, which obviously the government had to get their hands in it and change it. But in a way, that should almost kind of piss you off and want to bring back the Minutemen in a way, just because it's like, it was a cool concept, and it worked so well. Like, I mean, it was effective.
Yep.
Incredibly effective. So a couple hundred years that it was running for. Yeah.
No, it's a huge part of, I think our country's DNA. It was the first, and Revolutionary War started in 1775, by the way. I just checked it out. But
then I think the Minutemen started in 16 something?
Oh yeah, no, they were a lot.
But I'm just saying, from 16 whatever it was till 1917 or whatever. Mm-hmm. Could be a little off on my dates, but whatever. Early 1900s, sometime in the 1600s. That's how long that it was like an effective method to keep this country safe.
And it was just that's the thing, is it wasn't there were organized aspects of it, but it wasn't, and there were organized like state militias and stuff, but the Minutemen mentality wasn't you will do this from this time to this time. It was just like, it became a commonplace, the male of the household would have things practiced, disciplined, and ready and maintained to respond at a minute's notice. That became just like a common
it's
standard.
Just a responsibility amongst every American at the time.
And that is gone now. That's not something that is
I think it's coming back. I don't think it's commonplace, but I think it is slowly coming back.
Yeah. And I agree with that, but it's definitely not commonplace though.
No, definitely not.
And I think people are really, I think a huge thing that's opened people's eyes are what's going on in Ukraine. All the stuff that's going on, and how people's eyes have been open to crazy. Like, a major country can just go into another country and start just killing a bunch of people. Like, that is something that physically can happen. And I think a lot of people don't realize, because, and this has been overused at this point, but I hear it everywhere now. But, the common phrase you hear is that, hard times create hard men create easy times create soft men create hard times. So it's that constant.
Yeah, it's a ever-going cycle, and it.
Yep.
This, I feel like good times made soft men was it was almost like a long, drawn out cycle this time around.
Generations, I think.
Yeah. So.
You got your world wars created hard men, and a couple other wars in there, and then the onset of nuclear power, and which led into new innovation, new technology, just having more power, and enabled the civilian race to push into new discoveries. And I mean, if you look at the advance in technology, just in the last like 10 years. It's crazy, you know?
Oh, I know. Yeah. Yeah, it's made people very dependent on electrical, like just,
Just
your
technology.
phones, technology. But at the same time, it's good and bad. So it's bad because you can be force fed a lot of stuff, but at the same time, you can, if you know how to properly, like, kind of sift out some of the stuff that's just bullcrap, then you can get some pretty good information out of it too. Like, you can learn pretty much nonstop if you have a smartphone nowadays.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, I guess as a whole, you there's not much of an argument there. Like, the quality of life today,
it's crazy
due to the technology, is much better than it was.
Yeah.
Back like around World Wars and stuff. So
yeah,
the Great Depression and all that crap.
We are definitely in the good time, soft men time frame for sure. Like, there's no argument there.
But I think that's why it's more important than ever. And we do live in a more reconnaissance state, or a state where, or I guess an environment, a lifestyle where people are always trying to get information on you and what your interests are, and passively collecting data on you, and people are always, there's cameras everywhere, there's people are trying to control now more than ever, because of the availability in technology. So I think now more than ever, it's important to jump back into that personal responsibility. Like the stuff you were mentioning about your phone sifting through the BS, that's on you. That's your personal responsibility to do. You can, go down you can jump in on everything. You can get TikTok, all that stuff, and download it all and just like fully consume all that. And I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but I'm just saying, or you can, decide like when and where and what you're going to take up your time doing, how much data you're going to give out, that's a conversation for a different time. But, I think coming back to that Minutemen and Minutemen mentality is important. And the reason we went with Minutemen over Minuteman is because you can't do it on your own. I think a huge part of this mentality and of this discipline is coordinating with others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously individual responsibility, but then taking that responsibility to the next level and finding other people who feel the same as you, and building bonds and coordinating and working with them, and then building a group, and then having your group coordinate with other groups, and developing, for lack of a better word, a militia of individuals that, are coordinated. They're willing to fight if need be. They're willing to protect each other, their loved ones, their communities. They establish appropriate and disciplined channels of communication. They believe in freedom and have, structure of faith, whether it be, Stephen and I are both Christians, and so we have faith in Jesus Christ, and but having faith in some kind of higher power, I think, is one of the best ways to maintain a sense of morality, which is important, because that's all, in situations where the world gets turned upside down, having integrity and morality is what's going to separate you from being, an animal. And being able to survive and navigate, understand where you are, where you're going, respond, whether that be to assist others or medical response or whatever. These are all things that we kind of view have encompassed the mentality of like what you should be working towards. It's not anything singular. It's not owning a rifle. It's not, oh, I got nods, I'm good to go now. It's kind of funny because I've seen it's good, but I've seen so much push into night vision nowadays.
Yeah.
That it's almost like everyone's end goal. It's like, no, like that is a piece of equipment.
Yeah, and ultimately you got to know how to use the equipment too. So there's more to you know, the full piece of the pie. You know, in order to get the whole pie, you gotta not only have the equipment, but you gotta know how to use it as well.
Yep.
So if you get to that, you know, end goal, yeah, it's a big price tag item, and you know that's an awesome item to scratch off the box, or scratch off the, you know, list of things that you still need to get, because it's like, oh sweet, I finally got it. You know, but that doesn't mean you're done by any means. Like,
no. And you know, and there's different ways to approach it. You can. Some people's minds work like, hey, let's knock out the big ticket item now and then cherry pick my way through. Or, you know, there's the other side of it where it's like, hey, let me cherry pick through and then knock out the big ticket item towards the end. You know, it doesn't really matter. The good thing is there's time. There's still time left. As far as we know, you know, I mean, that's, no man really knows like how much time we have before something terrible could happen, but this stuff is important to get down and to wrap your head around and to build into your regiment, into your daily discipline, this kind of mentality before something happens. You know, you can't put your seatbelt on after you got in the car accident. It does you no good at that point.
yeah,
You got to have your seatbelt on and understand how to properly wear it and all that stuff before you even start driving anywhere. So I think in a nutshell, you know, like, all these things, it's stuff that Steven and I, you know, stuff that you and I are passionate about, and we want to help others push into this stuff. We want to help others coordinate, build their own teams, and not even teams really, but communities of people they can rely on, you know?
yeah, and it's not ultimately only about like, okay, we got to strap up and go to war.
Yeah.
That's not all it's about, but like within our group of guys that we have, you know, we have a decently small team of guys we train with, and you know, we made it very clear, like, hey, you know, we want this to be like a close bond, almost like a brotherhood, you know, where if anything goes wrong, let us know, you know, let just get on our group chat that we have and hit us up, because more than likely one of us is going to be available if you get a flat tire. Or, you know, me and Jacob kind of related it when we first were kind of like wanting to establish it more. Like, we always had these group of guys that we were training with and stuff, but we're like, you know what, let's actually like actively work together to kind of push toward this goal. And this has been going on for a little while now, but but when we first started up, we were like, you know, we had the closest thing we've experienced to that of just like people that aren't actually blood related to us, where they would just drop everything they were doing and come help, is when we were in the military. And you had that group of guys you could always rely on. Like, hey dude, I just had a flat, I'm stranded up on this highway, can anyone come get me? And it's like, even if they're busy, they're basically dropping what they're doing, they're coming to get you.
Right.
So having that kind of a group of guys around you is so beneficial.
Yeah. And it carries over. I mean, that's like, it extends to your family. You know, that's something that you want to develop and coordinate and build a bond with a group of guys and gals that would not only help drop at a moment's notice to help you, but help someone within your family. And I think that we've lost that. I think a lot of that has faded away in American culture and society. You know, it's all about building an image of yourself and
climbing to the top, whether it's knocking people down to get there. But
yeah,
which is pretty pathetic. But
it is, and it's lonely. You know, it's not a healthy way to be.
No,
humans we're not wired to have this isolated, you know, artificial engagement with people through like through the medium of like a screen. You know, that's not.
No,
it's we're wired to do this. We're wired to sit down across the table from each other and look eye to eye and talk about stuff and work through things.
While it records us and puts it on some other person's phone.
Puts it on someone's screen so they can absorb it through the medium of a screen. Oh man, how?
So long story short, don't listen to our podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but I mean, I think it's pretty understandable what we're getting at. But yeah, that's actually a good segue. Like, the whole point of this podcast is we want to do our best. We want to do what we can to help influence, and not even influence, but provide another avenue of long form information, knowledge, experience. It's not just going to be Steven and I on here. We'll obviously share our experiences and things we know, but we want to learn from other people too. And there's other people that our audience, can learn from. So we're going to have people on that have different experiences, different perspectives, different backgrounds. And we really want to make this, I guess, trajectory from here on out is, pursuing this mentality. And there'll be episodes where we'll get into the weeds, on something specific. We might be like, all right, today we're talking about, how to set up IR aiming devices or whatever. There's going to be specific stuff because that's all relevant to this whole thing. I mean,
yeah, gear,
equipment,
focusing
maintenance.
on gear, doing almost kind of like what our original podcast was, where it was going to be, kind of directed toward, specific gear or whatever. Like, okay, we're going to talk about, an EDC bags, like
right.
What we think should be in an EDC bag, which, I mean, that's just an example of one of the things we did in our last podcast, but I'm saying, okay, yeah, today we're going to be talking about, what do we feel is the best light out there, or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
That's all still geared toward getting people the information to set them up for success, because ultimately anyone that, actually everyone out there that's in this community, we want the best for them,
Yep.
And if we feel we can give that, if we can help people get there, then we're going to do our best to do that, I guess.
Yeah,
so,
we want to be one of many places you can get information from. The more information out there, the better. It allows people to make more informed decisions. It allows people to have access to different experiences that they'd otherwise never have access to because they physically, geographically aren't able to meet somebody. That's the beautiful thing about this podcast is this message, could be received somewhere that we'd never physically be able to go. And same goes for us. We listen to some different podcasts and stuff where, it's people we'd never really probably meet. So it's a cool way for people to connect and
they're living in like living conditions as well. Like, we're up in Alaska, so we don't deal with a lot of heat. We don't deal with some of the things that other, climates will deal with. But what we do deal with is we deal with cold, we deal with rain, we deal with actually pretty harsh conditions. Like, anyone that knows, Alaska is probably, I would say it's probably one of the rougher states to live in the United States. So we deal with pretty harsh conditions. So we get to test gear in an area that a lot of people don't get to test gear in. Like, if you live in California, good for you. But here's the thing. Yeah, you got terrible laws, but you have some of the best weather you're ever going to find anywhere. Like, you just are always in good weather. Mm-hmm. And you take it for granted, I'm sure. So, good for you.
Yeah, cue the guy now that's like, no, it rains hard here. It's like, yeah, what, like a handful of times a year?
Yeah, exactly. So
you have good weather all the time.
I mean, anyone that listens to the Joe Rogan Experience knows that he says that, yeah, he even took for granted California weather until he went up to Alaska and went on a hunt up here with Steve Ranella, and he was like, dude, I have never enjoyed the sun so much because they just got rained on the whole time. Mm-hmm. And that's what Alaska does.
Yep.
Because even when it's like summertime and it's not snow on the ground, there's a high chance that you're just getting dumped on in rain. So,
yep. Or you're just in this weird, just gray cloud cover forever, and it's just kind of cold and windy, and it's like, what? It just It can.
It's good to test gear in though, for sure.
Yeah.
Like whether it's bags, guns, radios, pretty much anything that has a chance of getting broken, wet, or damaged of any sort. It's gonna push it to its limits, which is a benefit we have being up here and going out and getting to run some of the gear that we get to run. So
yep, it's been good for development of our holsters and stuff like that. having like that super cold climate really tests like the boundaries of the plastics, and we actually run thicker plastics than most companies because of that reason. But yeah, no, I agree, but that's the thing is like this, and I think that's kind of what you were getting at is no matter where you live, like, or yeah, it doesn't matter where you live, you can still have the same mentality, and you can learn from people that live in other areas to kind of fine tune your
like
how
things
you do
that you
things.
may like. If you like, if I decided, hey, I'm gonna move, which I'm not going to, but I'm saying, if I was planning on moving down to Florida or something, and I heard like, okay, yeah, this does really good down here, no issues, blah blah blah, and it's something that I was not using up here because I felt like it was potentially could get damaged from how much moisture we get up here, which Florida gets a lot of rain too, so I don't know why I use Florida, but anyways, it would be something that you could consider because like somewhere like where we currently live, it's like I'm not considering that product, but down there I might consider it because I heard from this group of people that I trust that it's good or whatever. But
Yeah.
it just gives you a broader, you get to see different points of view in different locations, geographically, so which is cool.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think as we kind of start to wrap up, just to kind of dial back in on the trajectory, I mean, we've made it pretty clear at this point, but, it's not going to all be focused around that whole Minutemen mentality and like focus, but I guess in a way it'll always come back to, it can always be turned back to that. And it's just something that we really want to establish. We want to help to remove that negative connotation. It should be something that, I would love it to become something in society. Like that was something that people were proud of. Like, oh, I'm a Minuteman. It was like something that people held up with pride. Like, oh, I'm one of the people that's ready to defend our community at a minute's notice. So I think getting to that point, getting to that level where it's accepted in society and it's a regular thing that, responsible individuals adhere to and strive for is that my gear's established. I regularly train. I stay fit. I have food and supplies in my household for my family. My family knows what to do. I've coordinated with others. I understand my area and how to use it as a force multiplier and not have it as a liability. I passively or actively patrol my environment. These are things that if they're done now, they're done at peacetime. They're done when we don't have anything to worry about. It's a huge advantage for anything that ever happens. If you do have that, using air quotes, the British are coming kind of situation occur in God forbid in our country, you're ready, and you're ready, at a minute's notice. And I think, to me that is more of a metaphor, I think, of being so prepared and set up that, it's not necessarily 60 seconds. You've got all your kit on, you're ready to go, and you're just deploying. But it's just that, you know what I mean? It's the metaphor of like, you're so prepared and established that, if something happened within a minute, you're going to be able to start responding.
Yeah. You've got the shock and awe. It's not going to hit you as hard because you've actually prepared for that moment,
Yeah.
Where if you haven't had any preparation, you're going to be just useless for a little bit while you try to gather yourself.
Yeah, and you're going to be playing catch up. I mean, just take a hard look at what's going on in Ukraine. Thank God that the Russians are so ate up, running out of fuel and stuff on the way into a neighboring country, which that just boggles me. But the government is literally panic issuing AK-47s to just civilians all over the place, and they weren't prepared. I mean, they're doing a good job. Like, Ukraine is putting up a good fight, and it's because they've tasted freedom. They've tasted a little bit of freedom. Yeah, they have a lot of corruption and stuff in their country, but they've tasted freedom outside of this, like the Soviet Union, which it doesn't take take much. Doesn't take much freedom to feel better once you come out of the Soviet Union. But escaping a communist rule and having a little bit of your own freedom as your own country, they're going to fight tooth and nail for that. And if they had just been a little more prepared, and that's kind of, I think it's I think it's really opened eyes. I think people of all walks of life have been like, dang, maybe there is something to being at least a little bit prepared.
Yeah.
And once you take that first step of like, I'm going to be a little bit prepared, you start taking more steps, and it just kind of follows on into several things. So that's something we want to do with this podcast, is start giving the steps, start laying out the path for how do you get more prepared? What are some things to think about? We don't have all the answers, and we're not going to be like step 1, step 2, step 3, but we're going to give the things we believe, talk about some of the things we've done, give some of our ideas, and you guys can cherry pick as needed and help it, use things we talk about to, kind of decide on, this and that will work, this might not. Talk to other people, there's so much combined information. It's like, let's use it. Let's not take it for granted while we have it. While the airways are clear, so to speak, while information is still relatively free. I mean, that's becoming questionable, but while we can still get info out to each other broadly across the nation, across the world, let's do it. And let's try to influence and encourage each other to really step into that personal responsibility and have that mentality of, I will be prepared within a minute's notice. So.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it any better.
Anything else to add before we wrap this bad boy up?
I think that was a good one. I think it was a good first one.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, for our DDS Unscripted listeners, this is very much the same thing. Like Steven was saying, we're going to cover a lot of the same topics. Not literally the same, but we're going to go in the same direction we're going. Just a little more, I think it's a little more intentional now. We have a little more initiative now.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Less Caden.
Yeah, less Caden, which is a bummer. We're going to miss having the rambunctious Caden on the podcast, but he'll still be on it. He'll still be on it quite a bit. And at some point, realistically, he lives very far away. He's like 3 hours away from us now, just from where he is stationed at for his rescue squadron stuff. So if we can find a good quality way to have him remote, we're going to do that. And we're working on that because we've got a lot of really good guests that we'd like to have on remote, people that live in different states and stuff like that. Alaska's a fantastic place to live. We love it here, but that's one of the biggest downsides of it is like we are really far away from everywhere else. So, like I just said, Caden's in this state and he's he's still 3+ hours away from us. So, yeah. So, thanks for tuning in. And, we're going to try to do these a little more regular than we did in the past. We're going to really try to push into the podcast. We've gotten a lot of people like, where is the podcast? Where is it? Well, it's back. Here it is. Starting fresh. If some of your favorite episodes are gone, don't worry. There's some we're going to probably relaunch, and then some of them we're going to redo with like new people and kind of a new, fresh, modern take on things. And we're going to keep this thing going. So thank you guys for listening this far, and it was a pleasure to sit down with Steven. And
you too, man.
Yeah, and we'll get back in here. We're going to try to, at a minimum, do a podcast every 2 weeks. But hopefully we can get to the point where we got a new one every week. We're going to see kind of how it goes. Obviously, we've got a lot of business stuff to prioritize. We've got to build people's holsters and get them out the door and get slings out the door to people. And we got a lot of training stuff coming up. We're doing a trauma class here pretty soon, and all that good fun stuff. 2
trauma classes coming up pretty soon. So.
Oh yeah, 2. So lots of things, and then we have a lot of our other training classes like firearms training and or like some of our tactics training classes we're working on that we're going to be doing in the summer. So so busy time for the DDS squad, but definitely we look forward to more podcasts and getting more out there for you guys. And if you want to reach out, just hit us up, Dynamic Defense Solutions, ak@gmail.com. You could also hit us up at ddsunscripted@gmail.com. That email is going to probably go away. So, probably be safer using the Dynamic Defense Solutions AK@gmail.com. So, but thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to talking again next time with you guys.